I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. It's a cliché, I know, but I always believed that my relationship with Sarah was built on trust and love. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but things had been stable for quite a while. We were married for 5 years, and I thought we were happy. That was until the little signs started popping up, changes in her behavior that began to eat away at my peace of mind. It started subtly. Sarah would often get a text while we were watching TV or having dinner, and she'd be quick to turn her phone screen away from me. I dismissed it at first. After all, we both had our own lives, friends, and work. Plus, she was a little more private than I was. I always joked that she should be the one to write the rules on personal boundaries. But then the late-night phone calls started, and her excuses felt less convincing. She would say it was work-related, but who was working at 11 p.m.? I reminded myself that I trusted her, that I needed to give her the benefit of the doubt. Then came one fateful evening when I came home early from work. I was excited to surprise her with dinner, a little initiative to keep the spark alive in our marriage. As I stepped inside the house, I noticed it was too quiet for a Thursday evening. I figured she might have gone out to run some errands. But as I set about preparing dinner, I spotted something strange in our bedroom. I went to grab a couple of things from our closet when I noticed an unusual box tucked behind some shoes. It was a tampon box, oddly positioned, almost like it was placed there deliberately for me not to see. Out of curiosity, I pulled it out and opened it. My heart dropped when I found another phone nestled inside. At first, I thought it might be an old phone Sarah had forgotten about. But then I turned it on and there it was, a stream of unread messages. The lock screen was a picture of Sarah, my wife, smiling, a smile I had seen countless times before. But the messages, oh the messages. They were from someone with my name. My heart raced as I read through the texts, a sinking feeling of dread washing over me. It was a conversation filled with intimate details, flirtation, and arrangements for meetups. I felt like the room was spinning. I couldn't believe that my wife was having an affair and with someone who shared the same name as me. It felt like a sick joke. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, rereading the messages, the world around me fading away. The betrayal hit me hard like a punch to the gut. I could barely breathe, and I felt a rush of emotions flood through me: anger, confusion, heartbreak. That night I confronted her. When she walked through the door, I was pacing the living room, the phone clutched tightly in my hand. She looked startled and immediately sensed that something was off. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with a mix of concern and annoyance. I couldn't hold back. I showed her the phone and demanded answers. Her reaction was not what I expected. Instead of shock or remorse, she became defensive. "How did you find that? That's my old phone. I was trying to hide it because it has personal stuff on it," she snapped, a hint of anger in her voice. I pressed her for the truth, but she just came up with excuse after excuse, dismissing the messages as old or not what they seemed. My heart sank further with each lie that rolled off her tongue. I could feel my anger boiling over, but beneath that rage was an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I had trusted this woman, shared my life with her, and now she was lying right to my face. I wanted to scream, to make her understand the pain she had caused me. Instead, I felt utterly defeated, as if the ground had been pulled from under my feet. As the confrontation escalated, I couldn't help but question everything. Had our entire marriage been a facade? Could I have missed all the signs? I felt like a fool for doubting my instincts, for ignoring the red flags. I needed to collect my thoughts and figure out what to do next. This was just the beginning, and I was about to embark on a journey filled with heartache, revelations, and ultimately, the pursuit of revenge. But before I could even begin to think about that, I had to process the emotional fallout from what I had just discovered. In the aftermath of the confrontation, I found myself in a whirlwind of emotions. I sat on the edge of our bed, the phone still in my hand, replaying every moment in my mind. How could Sarah, someone who I thought I knew so well, betray me like this? I felt a sense of disbelief mingling with a growing anger. I could hardly process the reality of what I had learned. Part of me wanted to lash out, to yell and scream, but the other part of me was just too devastated to move. Sarah continued to try and justify her actions, but her words fell flat against the weight of the evidence. "You don't understand," she insisted, her voice wavering. "I was just venting to a friend. It doesn't mean anything." I shook my head in disbelief. What kind of venting leads to secret meetings and intimate exchanges? It was all so absurd, and yet there it was, right in front of me. As she rambled on, I started to feel numb. I couldn't process the lies. It was like each word she spoke was a dagger, stabbing deeper into my heart. I felt betrayed on a level I had never experienced before. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a violation of the trust we had built over years. I wanted to confront her with every detail, every text I had read, but I held back. I realized that arguing would only lead to more lies, more excuses. After what felt like hours of back and forth, I reached a boiling point. "I deserve better than this, Sarah," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "You've shattered our marriage with your lies and deceit. I don't even recognize you anymore." Her face fell, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by anger. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to find someone else." She shot back, her voice rising. That accusation hurt more than I could express. I had tried to be a good husband, to support her in every way I could. To hear her twist the situation back on me felt like salt in an open wound. The night dragged on and sleep eluded me. Every thought was consumed by betrayal and anger. I paced the living room in circles, the phone still clenched tightly in my fist. I contemplated my options. Part of me wanted to fight for our marriage, to see if we could salvage what was left. But another part of me was screaming for revenge. How could I just let this go? Eventually, I decided I needed to take a step back. I needed a plan, a way to regain control of my life. I couldn't let her get the upper hand, and I couldn't let her dictate my emotions any longer. I would gather evidence, not just to confront her, but to understand the full scope of her betrayal. That's when I began to investigate, looking into where she went during her late-night escapades and who she was communicating with. I thought back to the messages I had seen on that phone. They were flirtatious and intimate, but there were also references to meetups that made my stomach churn. The thought of her with someone else was unbearable, and I felt a sense of urgency to uncover the truth. I started by shadowing her during the day, casually following her without her knowing. It felt like I was in some twisted spy film, but I needed to know who this other person was. I watched as she left the house one afternoon, dressed in a way that was different from her usual style, more revealing, more seductive. My heart raced as I followed her, hiding in the shadows. The drive was agonizing. I could only imagine where she was headed. She pulled up to a cafe on the other side of town, a place I'd never seen her visit. My pulse quickened as I parked a few cars down, forcing myself to breathe. I watched her walk towards the entrance, and just as I was about to step out of the car, she turned and smiled at someone waiting outside. He was tall, with dark hair and an easy smile that made my blood boil. I felt an overwhelming wave of nausea wash over me as I realized how comfortable she seemed with him. They hugged, and I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. The reality of her betrayal sank deeper than I had imagined. I couldn't stay there any longer. I needed to leave to process what I had just witnessed. I drove, aimlessly, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. This man, this stranger, was encroaching on my life, my marriage. I needed to do something to make sure they felt the weight of their actions. That night I sat on the couch, wide awake, devising a plan. I would gather more evidence, more details about this affair, and when the time was right, I would unleash the truth on Sarah. She would see what it felt like to be betrayed. The thought gave me a sick sense of satisfaction, but it was also a reminder of the pain I was enduring. I felt a storm brewing inside me, a mix of rage and sorrow, as I prepared for the next phase of my newly chaotic life. The weeks that followed my discovery felt like a blend of surreal detachment and simmering fury. I was determined to gather evidence, to build a case against Sarah that would expose her deceit and lay bare the facade of our marriage. My days were spent in a constant state of surveillance, monitoring her every move as if I were a detective in one of those crime dramas. I became hyper-aware of every detail, the way she dressed, the time she spent on her phone, and the little smiles that crossed her lips when she believed I wasn't looking. I would sit in my car outside the cafe where I had first seen her with the mystery man, waiting for hours on end. It was like clockwork. She would arrive at the same time, sometimes with a flirtatious bounce in her step. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught in a loop of grief and anger. Each time I saw her with him, laughter spilling out from the cafe, it was a reminder of what I had lost. It was an unbearable weight that I carried with me everywhere I went. In one of those moments when I was waiting outside, a thought struck me. I could record their rendezvous. With my phone in hand, I began filming discreetly, my heart racing as I captured the intimate conversations and stolen kisses between them. I felt a mix of revulsion and satisfaction. The evidence I was collecting was concrete proof of her betrayal. This was the ammunition I would use to confront her, to make her understand the full impact of her actions, and I wanted her to feel the pain I felt. As I continued my investigation, I heard snippets of their conversations, their laughter carrying through the air like daggers. Sarah spoke about her stressful life, and I felt the bitterness rise inside me as I realized she had turned to someone else to fill a void I never knew existed. The more I heard, the more I felt like an outsider in my own life, watching a show that was no longer mine. It was during one of these spying sessions that I noticed something peculiar. Sarah received a message while they were sitting together, and her face changed the moment she read it. It was as if a veil had been lifted. She glanced around nervously, her smile fading for just a moment. I felt a jolt of curiosity. What kind of message could elicit such a reaction? I decided to act. I had already collected enough footage, but I wanted to know more. I followed them this time, my heart pounding as I trailed them to a nearby park where they had gone for a walk. I kept my distance, hiding behind trees and benches, watching as they interacted. The intimacy they shared was palpable, and jealousy surged through me like a raging storm. After about an hour, they sat down on a bench, their bodies closed together. I raised my phone to capture their conversation as they leaned in closer, whispers exchanged like secrets. I caught a glimpse of the message that had stirred her earlier. It was from someone else with my name. My heart sank again. Was this a joke? Another layer of betrayal? I pulled back, my mind racing to make sense of what I had just witnessed. I felt a mix of confusion and determination wash over me. There I was, a husband watching his wife betray him not once but possibly twice. The fury inside me was intensifying, and it was clear that I needed to confront her soon. This couldn't go on. I couldn't be the man who stood idly by while the love of his life shattered everything we had built together. I waited for Sarah to come home later that night, my heart racing as I prepared for the confrontation. I had seen enough to know that I wouldn't go in unarmed. I had the footage and the evidence. It was time to lay it all out to force her to face the truth of her actions. When she walked through the door, I felt a chill run down my spine. She looked at me with a mix of apprehension and false cheer, like she was trying to gauge my mood. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked casually, but I could see the tension beneath her smile. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and hit play on the video I had recorded. The silence hung heavy in the air as her eyes widened, realization dawning on her face. I watched as her facade crumbled, the initial confidence giving way to a look of horror as she witnessed herself laughing and flirting with another man. What is this?" she stuttered, her voice shaking. "You tell me, Sarah." I replied, my voice low and steady, but the anger simmered just beneath the surface. "How could you do this to me, to us?" She opened her mouth to respond, but the words failed her. I could see her scrambling for excuses, her mind racing to form a narrative that would absolve her of guilt. "It was just a mistake, I swear it didn't mean anything," she pleaded, tears beginning to form in her eyes, but I wasn't buying it. "Just a mistake. You've been seeing him for weeks, and now I find out there's someone else with my name involved." The betrayal cut deeper than I could articulate. I felt my heart harden as I processed her words, each one a desperate attempt to evade the truth. As she tried to backtrack, I realized this wasn't just about her infidelity anymore. This was about my dignity, my self-worth. I didn't want to be just another victim in her story. I needed to reclaim my sense of self, and that meant making a decision. I took a deep breath, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. This isn't love, Sarah. This is manipulation. I deserve better than this. I've given you everything and you've thrown it away for a thrill. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I had gathered the evidence and I knew what I had to do next. I couldn't afford to let her lie her way out of this. It was time to take back my power, to embrace the anger and pain and turn it into something that would fuel my next steps. It was time for revenge, but first, I needed to confront the emotional turmoil that lay ahead. The confrontation with Sarah had left me feeling like a storm was brewing inside me. I could see the fear in her eyes as she realized that I had evidence of her betrayal, that I was no longer the oblivious husband who would turn a blind eye to her lies. The tears streaming down her face were not enough to evoke any sympathy from me. Instead, they ignited a cold fury that pushed me further away from her. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking with desperation. It was a moment of weakness. I was feeling lost. Lost. Is that your excuse for cheating on me, for laughing and flirting with other guys while I'm out here supporting you? I cut her off, my voice steady but laced with irritation. What do you want me to say? That it's okay? That I should just forgive you and we can pretend this never happened? She shook her head, her expression shifting from desperation to frustration. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just confused and you weren't paying enough attention to me. The audacity of her words left me speechless for a moment. I had given her everything I could, every ounce of my attention and love, and yet here she was, deflecting responsibility onto me. Confused. You turned to another man, two men, apparently, because you were confused. I felt my pulse quicken, rage bubbling just beneath the surface. If you wanted to talk to me, to express your feelings, you could have. But instead, you chose to betray me. She opened her mouth to respond, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. Nothing she could say would change what she had done. I had already made my decision, and it was time to follow through. As I stood there, watching the woman I had loved for years fall apart before me, I realized that I needed to take control of my own narrative. I needed to show her the consequences of her actions. "Sarah, I can't do this anymore. I can't be in a relationship with someone who has no respect for our vows," I said firmly. "You've made your choice and now I'm going to make mine. I deserve better than this and you need to understand the impact of your betrayal." Her demeanor shifted again and I could see the anger bubbling beneath her surface. "So what? You're just going to throw away everything we've built together? You're going to walk away just like that?" "I didn't throw it away, you did," I shot back, feeling emboldened. "You made your choices and now I'm making mine. I'm done being the fool in this situation." As the weight of my words settled in, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I was reclaiming my life, my self-worth, and I wouldn't allow her to pull me back into the cycle of manipulation and deceit. I turned and started towards the door, my heart pounding as I envisioned the path that lay ahead. "Where are you going?" she called after me, her voice laced with panic. "You can't just leave like this." "I'm going to figure out how to move on from this mess," I replied without turning back. "And I hope you take a hard look at yourself while you're at it." I left the house, the cool night air hitting my face like a splash of cold water. I needed to breathe, to think. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins as I drove aimlessly, contemplating my next steps. The anger that had consumed me was now morphing into a determination to rebuild my life, to find my footing again. As I drove through the empty streets, I thought about how to execute my plan for revenge. I wanted to make Sarah understand how deeply she had hurt me, but I also wanted to protect myself moving forward. Revenge could be sweet, but it could also be a double-edged sword. I couldn't let my emotions lead me into a dark place. I needed to be strategic, to make sure my actions had the impact I wanted without jeopardizing my future. After hours of driving and thinking, I came up with a plan. I would gather more evidence, not just against Sarah, but also against the other man. I needed to reveal the extent of her infidelity to everyone involved. It was time for her to feel the consequences of her actions, to understand that cheating comes with a price. In the following days, I gathered all the evidence I could find, compiling text messages and video footage. I made notes of the times she had gone out, the interactions I'd witnessed, and the little lies she had spun to cover her tracks. I felt a sense of purpose as I organized everything meticulously, almost like preparing for court. But it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my power. It was about standing up for myself and making sure that Sarah and the other man understood that they had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I wanted them to know that I wouldn't just roll over and accept the betrayal. I would fight back. Late one night, I finally made the decision to confront the other man. I had learned his name through the messages Sarah had exchanged, and now it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. I wouldn't let him think he could waltz into my life and take what was mine without repercussions. I found his social media accounts, and after some digging, I discovered where he worked. The next day, I parked outside his office, my heart racing as I prepared for what was about to unfold. I wanted him to see me, to understand who he had hurt, and to realize that I was no longer the man he thought he could outmaneuver. As I sat there waiting, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and dread. I was about to confront someone who had betrayed not just me, but also my marriage. The emotional toll of Sarah's affair had been immense, and now it was time to channel that pain into something powerful. I was ready to take back my life, and that meant facing down the man who had crossed the line. As I sat in my car outside the office building, a mix of anger and determination coursed through me. I waited patiently, watching every person who walked in and out of the lobby. I needed to catch this man off guard, to show him that I wasn't someone he could ignore. He had crossed a line with Sarah, and now he would face the fallout of his actions. Finally, I spotted him, tall, with that same smug smile that had undoubtedly charmed Sarah. He walked out of the building, his phone glued to his ear as he laughed lightly at something someone had said. It was infuriating to watch him be so carefree, so oblivious to the chaos he had caused in my life. I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve as I stepped out of my car. "Hey, you!" I called, my voice cutting through the street like a knife. He turned, his smile fading as confusion washed over his face. "What's this about?" he asked, his tone defensive as he quickly ended the call. "You know exactly what this is about," I replied, my heart racing. "You think you can just swoop in and take what's mine. You think you can have a relationship with my wife and face no consequences." His initial shock transformed into a cocky grin. "Listen, man, you don't know the whole story." "I know enough," I interrupted, stepping closer. "I've seen your messages. I've watched you with her. You think this is just a game. She's married and you've played with something you have no right to touch." He crossed his arms, his bravado still intact, but I could see a flicker of unease in his eyes. "You think yelling at me is going to change anything? I didn't force her to do anything. She made her choices." "It's easy to hide behind that excuse," I shot back, feeling the anger surge within me. "But you deserve to know the impact of your actions. You've torn apart a marriage and you'll answer for it." I motioned to the phone in my hand, the evidence I had meticulously gathered. "I have your messages, your conversations. You think I'm just going to let this slide? You've made a big mistake, and I'm not going to let you walk away unscathed." His cockiness began to wane as I continued. "I'm going to show Sarah what kind of man you really are. I'll make sure everyone knows how you've crossed a line with a married woman." I could see the hint of panic in his eyes as I spoke. He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "You can try to downplay this, but the truth is going to come out. You think you can use her for your pleasure and just walk away when it's convenient. Not anymore." The tension hung thick in the air, and I could feel a sense of empowerment washing over me as I stood my ground. I had taken control of the situation, and I was no longer the passive husband who would simply accept betrayal. It felt good to confront the man who had caused me so much pain. "Look," he finally said, his tone shifting slightly. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know she was married at first. She never mentioned you." The moment he spoke those words, I knew I had struck a nerve. "Of course she didn't, because if she did, she couldn't keep you around, could she?" I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. "You're just as guilty as she is, and I won't let you off the hook that easily." As I spoke, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I had gone from the sorrowful, betrayed husband to someone who was willing to fight for his dignity. I was reclaiming my sense of self-worth, and having this confrontation felt like a crucial step in moving forward. I wouldn't let Sarah's betrayal define me. I was crafting my own narrative. "Just leave us alone, man," he said finally, his bravado crumbling. "You're making this worse." "I'm making it worse for you," I shot back, feeling a sense of satisfaction. "You've already made it worse for me. Now it's your turn to face the consequences." For a moment, we stood there in silence, the weight of the situation hanging heavily between us. I could see the realization settling in for him, that he had underestimated me and the lengths I would go to for my own peace of mind. It felt like a turning point, both for me and for him. "Consider this your warning," I said, my voice firm. "I'll make sure everyone knows the kind of person you are, and I'll make sure Sarah knows what a liar she's been. You think you can just waltz into someone's life and play the role of the charming guy? Not anymore." With that, I turned to leave, feeling the adrenaline coursing through me. I had confronted the man who had intruded on my life, and it felt liberating. I was ready to take back control of my story. I still had to confront Sarah again, to lay bare the truth of what I had done, but I felt stronger now, more resolute. Driving home, I replayed the confrontation in my mind. I had stood my ground, and it felt good. I was no longer just the victim in this situation. I was reclaiming my life and my identity. I had a plan, and I was determined to see it through. When I walked through the front door, I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her expression unreadable. She looked up at me, and I could see the remnants of her previous panic, the fear of the unknown hanging in the air. I knew she could sense that something had shifted, that I was no longer the same man she had manipulated. "It's time for us to talk again," I said firmly, my heart racing as I prepared for the final confrontation. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to lay it all out on the table. I wouldn't hold back. I was ready to expose the truth and demand accountability. It was time to end this chapter of my life and begin the next, one where I would no longer accept betrayal. As I stepped into the living room, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Sarah sat on the edge of the couch, her body tense as she looked up at me. The air was thick with anticipation, and I knew this conversation would determine the fate of our marriage. "I know what you've been doing, Sarah," I said, my voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of anger. "I just confronted the man you've been cheating with, and now it's time for you to face the truth." Her eyes widened with panic, and I could see the color drain from her face. "What do you mean? What did you say to him?" she stammered, her voice trembling slightly. "I told him exactly what I thought of his actions and how you've betrayed our marriage," I replied, deciding to lay it all out. "I have evidence, Sarah. I have everything, the texts, the videos, everything you've tried to hide from me." I pulled out my phone, navigating to the videos I had recorded. "You think I was just going to stand by and let you lie your way out of this? Not anymore. You've made your choices, and now I'm making mine." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand to silence her. "No more excuses, no more deflections. You need to understand the gravity of what you've done to me, to us." Her expression shifted from panic to resentment. "You're going to ruin everything, aren't you? You're going to destroy our lives over a mistake." "Mistake?" I echoed incredulously. "What you've done is far from a mistake, Sarah. A mistake is spilling a drink or forgetting an anniversary. Cheating is a conscious choice, and you made that choice repeatedly. You disrespected our vows and treated our marriage like a game. You think I'm just going to forgive you and pretend everything is okay." Her eyes glistened with tears as she struggled to find the right words. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was confused and I made the wrong choice. Can't we just talk about this like adults?" "Talk," I scoffed, feeling the anger rise within me again. "You spent weeks lying to me. You thought you could keep it a secret and everything would be fine. You've shattered my trust, Sarah. You don't get to just smooth things over with a conversation." The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air as I faced her. My heart ached, but I knew deep down that I had to be strong. I had to stand up for myself, to show her that I wouldn't tolerate her betrayal any longer. "I'm done with this," I said, my voice firm. "I can't be in a marriage where trust is non-existent. I deserve better than this, and I need to put myself first for once. I'm choosing to walk away from this." Shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please don't do this. We can work through it. We can fix things." "I wish I could believe that, but the truth is I don't think we can. You've broken something that can't be repaired. I can't unsee what I've seen. I can't pretend that things are normal again. The finality of my words hung in the air, and I could see the realization dawning on her that this was truly it. I wasn't going to be her safety net anymore. I wasn't going to be the husband she run back to after tearing our lives apart. I'm moving out, I continued, trying to keep my emotions steady. I'll find a place on my own and we can sort through the details later. I just need space to process everything and to heal. The shock on her face was palpable as she sat there in silence, the gravity of our situation settling in. You can't just leave. What about everything we've built together? She pleaded, her voice cracking. Everything we built together is based on a lie, Sarah. I can't stay here knowing that you've betrayed me so severely. It's not just about the affair, it's about the trust that has been shattered beyond repair. I replied, feeling a mix of sorrow and relief wash over me. As I turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of liberation. It was painful to walk away from the life we had built, but I knew I was making the right choice for my own well-being. I wasn't just leaving Sarah. I was leaving behind the hurt, the betrayal, and the anguish that had defined our relationship for too long. In the following weeks, I focused on rebuilding my life. I moved into a small apartment, a space that was mine alone, a fresh start. I sought therapy to unpack the emotional toll of the betrayal, to help guide me through the grief of losing a love I thought was unshakable. I surrounded myself with supportive friends who lifted me up, reminding me that I deserved happiness and love without the shadow of deceit hanging over me. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I learned valuable lessons about self-worth and the importance of setting boundaries. I realized that love should never come at the cost of one's dignity, and that it's okay to walk away from something toxic, no matter how painful it may be. I wanted to share my story because I knew that I wasn't alone. So many people have faced betrayal in relationships, and I hope to encourage others to stand up for themselves. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once it's broken, rebuilding is often impossible. Choosing to prioritize oneself is not selfish. It's necessary for healing and growth. As I closed this chapter of my life, I felt hopeful. I knew that there were better things ahead for me, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next with open arms. The pain would fade over time, and I would emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before.